Hello there. You're watching All 24 News World News program live from Algiers with me, Karim Zachary. These are your headlines. The heads of diplomacy and defense of the United States, Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, met on Sunday in Kiev with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Victorious Macron vows to unite France after fending off Le Pen threat. He acknowledges divisions after historic 13 million votes for Le Pen's anti-immigration party. Inhabitants in Beijing rushed to buy food and other supplies at the city's largest districts began mass testing of all residents. First off in our news, the heads of diplomacy and defense of the United States, Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, met on Sunday in Kiev with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. During the visit, Washington announced on Monday an additional military aid to Ukraine and the return of American diplomats to the country. Nabil Khazini reports.
In the highest-level visit by U.S. officials to Ukraine since the start of the conflict in the country, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin headed to Kiev on Sunday to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. Warmly welcomed by the Ukrainian president, who didn't miss the chance to thank the United States for its support to Ukraine.
We're happy to see you in Kyiv at such an important time for our country.
A support which will be reinforced by a $165 million sale of ammunition for Ukraine, along with more than $300 million in foreign military financing.
We are here to support you in every way possible. I think you've seen the evidence of that throughout, but most recently, as you've mentioned, the commitment of an additional $1 billion worth of security assistance on top of some of the other things that we've done.
The two officials announced that U.S. diplomats who left Ukraine just before the start of the conflict will gradually return. However, the U.S. embassy in Kiev will still remain closed.
As a further sign of our commitment, I intend to announce the return of our diplomats to Ukraine. I think we will start probably in Lviv and then move to Kyiv. It may take a few weeks, but I'll announce that tomorrow.
According to the annual report of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, military spending worldwide in 2021 exceeded $2 trillion, reaching the highest figure ever recorded. An increase is expected this year due to the conflict in Ukraine.
In related news, Ukrainian president or presidential advisor announces that Ukraine has offered talks to Russia in Mariupol's southeast, where Ukrainian fighters and civilians are still entrenched in a city largely under Russian control, according to the Ukrainian presidency.
We invited the Russians to hold a special session of talks. Right next to Azovstal site, our Russian interlocutors were summoned to talk to agree an immediate ceasefire.
Still in the Russia-Ukraine file, according to a senior Russian military commander, a new Russian intercontinental ballistic missile is capable of delivering many hypersonic warheads. The Russian military strategic missile forces commander, called Jan Sergei Karakiev, claimed in televised remarks that the new Sarmat ICBM is designed to carry several avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles. In Russia still, Russia's energy ministry says a massive fire at an oil depot in western Russia will not cause fuel shortages. The ministry said in a statement that Monday's fire inflicted damage to a depot containing diesel fuel in Bryansk, and authorities are dealing with the consequences of the blaze. The ministry said fuel supplies to consumers haven't been interrupted and noted that the region has enough diesel fuel for 15 days. The Emergencies Ministry said earlier that a huge blaze erupted overnight at the depot owned by Transneft Druzhba, a subsidiary of the Russian state-controlled company Transneft, which operates the western-bound Druzhba friendship pipeline carrying crude to Europe. It wasn't immediately clear what caused the blaze and whether it could affect deliveries to Europe. To other topical news now, incumbent Emmanuel Macron has vowed to tackle the country's doubts and divisions during his second five-year term after defeating his far-right rival Marine Le Pen in the French presidential runoff. Zara Frajani has more details.
Emmanuel Macron has successfully won the French presidential election on Sunday to become the first president to secure a second mandate since Jacques Chirac 20 years ago.
Merci.
Speaking to supporters in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Macron acknowledged he would have to preside over a divided nation in his second term, after many backed his rival or failed to vote.
Je sais aussi que nombre de nos compatriotes ont voté ce jour pour moi.
I know that many of our compatriots voted for me today, not to support the ideas that I hold, but to block those at the far right. I want to thank them here and tell them that I'm aware that this vote binds me for the years to come. I'm the custodian of their sense of duty, of their attachment to the Republic, of respect for the differences that have been expressed in recent weeks.
Et du respect des différences qui se sont exprimées ces dernières semaines.
Le Pen conceded shortly after the first projections showed Macron defeating her by 58.2% to 41.8%. Le Pen upgraded her 2017 score by some 8 points when she won 33.9% of the votes.
With more than 43% of the votes, tonight's result represents in itself a bright victory.
Twitter was rocked by international cheers to French President Macron as leaders around the globe tweeted their congratulations in support of the re-elected president for his second mandate. The day after Emmanuel Macron's re-election, French voters say they are rather relieved, while others fear suffering with this new five-year term.
Oui, bien sûr, j'ai voté.
Of course I voted, and I'm relieved. I'm not particularly pro-Macron, but there is still a choice to be made, and that was good news yesterday.
Voilà, c'était une bonne nouvelle hier.
France's allies will likely breathe a sigh of relief, but Le Pen's increased vote could sound alarm for the West. Le Pen's previous ties to Russia, an enthusiastic view of NATO, and hostile view of the EU meant that her victory would have rattled cages around the world.
Still, with the French elections, shortly after the announcement of the victory of outgoing President Emmanuel Macron over his rival Marine Le Pen, several hundred demonstrators took to the street in Paris, despite a large deployment of the police. Protesters claim that they don't want Le Pen, but also disagree on Macron's re-election due to his policy. Several garbage fires were lit by the demonstrators, and the police sprayed tear gas on protesters. Still in France, police fired on a vehicle which tried to hit them in the center of Paris, killing two of its occupants and injuring a third. The vehicle was traveling in the wrong direction when the police wanted to stop it. Paris prosecutor and the police are investigating the Pont Neuf in Paris, where a vehicle attempted to ram police forces on Sunday, killing two occupants of the vehicle and injuring a third. To other news now. The candidate of the Liberal Party, Robert Kolob, a newcomer to politics, came out on top in the legislative elections in Slovenia, far ahead of the formation of Prime Minister Janez Janša. The former entrepreneur got into politics to put an end to the controversial outgoing government. The details with Hassan Burkan.
A businessman recently converted to politics won the Slovenian legislative elections on Sunday, according to partial results, ahead of Prime Minister Janez Janša, accused of undermining democracy. The Freedom Movement of Liberal candidate Robert Golob, 55 years old, was accredited with 35.8% of the vote against 22.5% of the Slovenian Democratic Party of Conservative, Mr. Janša, 63 years old. Golob declared in front of his supporters by video conference due to his COVID infection that he will have to work hard to justify the trust that has been given to him.
I want to express my admiration for all the citizens who went to the polls today. We have never seen such a turnout in the last 20 years. People want to change and have expressed confidence in us as the only ones who can bring about those changes. Tomorrow is a new day, and from tomorrow we will have to work hard to justify the trust that has been given to us.
In his headquarters in the capital Ljubljana, the speech was greeted with applause and shouts of joy by his supporters, who consider the result a victory for freedom.
I'm so happy. I can't imagine, because this result is wonderful.
I feel very happy today because the freedom won. I expect it will be better. Slovenia will join West Europe again.
The turnout stood at 49.3%, almost 15 points more than in 2018. According to the Electoral Commission. If the results are confirmed, it would be a heavy defeat for Mr. Janša, omnipresent on the Slovenian political scene for 3 decades.
To China now. Inhabitants in Beijing rushed to buy food and other supplies as the city's largest districts began mass testing of all residents on Monday, raising worries of a Shanghai-style lockdown following dozens of COVID-19 instances in the capital in recent days.
Authorities in Shaoyang, which has a population of 3.55 million people, ordered residents and workers to be tested 3 times this week as Beijing warned the virus had silently spread in the city for roughly a week before being found.
There is definitely a certain degree of worry because it will affect jobs and the overall efficiency, but I don't think it will develop as it has in Shanghai. From my point of view, it can be controlled. I haven't watched videos of Shanghai, but from what I have heard, I believe control policies will be more cautious and rigorous in Beijing.
City dwellers flocked to supermarkets and online marketplaces to stock up on lush vegetables, fresh meat, instant noodles, and rolls of toilet paper. In Shanghai, where the majority of its 25 million citizens have been shut down for a week.
Personally, I think it's the same for young people and those in their 30s. Generally speaking, the elders at home have more time, and they have a stronger mindset of having to take care of their children and their families, so they are more proactive to buy supplies. But for the others like us, we have to treat this situation as normally as possible.
Where the majority of its 25 million citizens have been shut down for weeks, the biggest food supply bottleneck has been a lack of couriers to make supplies to residents' home, fueling locals' rage. According to the state-backed Beijing daily, supermarket giants such as Carrefour and Walmart reported their inventories and had more than quadrupled, while Meituan's grocery-focused e-commerce site expanded stock and the number of personnel for sorting and delivery. Beijing has reported 47 locally transmitted cases since Friday, with Shaoyang accounting for over half of them. Even in places like Haidian, which have yet to record any cases in the current outbreak, there is rising concerns about food availability.
And that was Sofian Kenturi reporting. Still in Asia, Japan will send the Vice Foreign Minister to the Solomon Islands amid concerns regarding the recent security deal signed by the South Pacific island with China, which might strengthen Beijing's military influence in the region. Vice Foreign Minister traveled to the Solomon Islands follows a visit by a senior U.S. team last week, which warned that if the security arrangement with China possesses a danger to U.S. or ally interests, Washington might take unspecified action against the South Pacific island. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has expressed his country's total opposition to China's alleged plans to establish a military base in the Solomon Islands, describing it as a red line for Canberra and its allies. Morrison confirmed in a statement that he is still in contact with the Solomon Islands government, which recently concluded a security agreement with China, and informs of Canberra's position on this matter.
We won't be having Chinese military naval bases in our region on our doorstep. Engaged in what I think is a sewer tactic here, and I think Josh Frydenberg has set that out very clearly today. It's a desperate ploy. I share the same red line that the United States has when it comes to these issues.
To Myanmar now. Myanmar Junta Court has delayed verdict in Aung San Suu Kyi corruption trial on Aung San Suu Kyi, the former leader of Myanmar, has been detained since the general staged a coup and ousted her government in February last year, and in the Southeast Asian country's brief period of democracy. To the Middle East now. Zionist tanks fired into southern Lebanon early Monday in response to a rocket fired from the country, according to Zionist military. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the rocket fire, but the Zionist military spokesman said he assumed the rocket was launched by Palestinian militants in Lebanon, spurred on by the recent events in the West Bank and Gaza. Still in the Middle East, the Lebanese army found another body from a migrant boat, bringing the death toll up to 7 as rescue efforts continue. The boat left on Saturday from the Kalamoun region, south of Tripoli in northern Lebanon, according to local authorities. The boat was carrying about 60 people whose nationalities were not specified. According to an aid organization, clashes between competing factions in Sudan's Darfur killed at least 168 people on Sunday, the latest outbreak of deadly violence in the restive area. Darfur has experienced an increase in fatal fighting since October last year, spurred by disputes mostly over land, cattle, and access to water and pasture. Darfur was wrecked by civil war that started in 2003. Tunnels in the Gaza Strip still make their place the best strategic methods adopted by the Palestinian resistance in their continuous fight against the Zionist occupiers. The tunnels of the region make the best of profit for the armed Palestinian resistance in their role in defending the cause of the country.
In a tunnel dug in the south of Gaza Strip, Palestinian resistance is preparing for new confrontation with Zionist occupation, which they consider imminent after an increase in tensions in the Palestinian territories. On the surface, nothing seems like it, but deep in a wooded area near Khan Yunis, 7 masked men in fatigues armed with machine guns and rocket launchers rush into a discreet hole at the foot of Sandy Hill, the gateway to a secret tunnel.
We have offensive and defensive tunnels. Defensive tunnels are the ones we use to hide from reconnaissance, planes, and Zionist spy systems. The offensive tunnels guarantee us a wide area of incursion into our occupied lands to repel invasions and capture soldiers. The tunnel is considered a strategic weapon for the Palestinian resistance. It is an important and dangerous weapon that creates fear and terror for the Zionists, whether soldiers or settlers.
These fighters from Al-Quds brigades, the armed wing of resistance, the main Palestinian armed group after Hamas, penetrate one by one into this narrow opening, which opens onto a tunnel on the ground floor and whose walls are covered with prefabricated panels, aeration pipes, telecommunications cables, and small rooms for storing weapons are laid out in the electrically powered tunnel.
In the coming days, we will let them know about the resistance capabilities and Al-Quds Brigade to penetrate this so-called wall that the occupation army claims to have built in the eastern Gaza Strip.
These underground galleries are used to capture Zionist soldiers, repel ground incursions, and carry out various other operations. notes a commander of the brigade on the spot, who's just received a radio signal informing him of a security incident in eastern Gaza. False alarm. To circumvent the enemy's blockade against Gaza, put in place after the seizure of power by Hamas in 2007, the Palestinians had multiplied the tunnels under the border with Egypt in order to bring in weapons and ammunition. Since the end of March, following 2 deadly attacks carried out in Tel Aviv region, Zionist army has stepped up operations in Jenin, a sector in the north of the West Bank.
We have 24 hours a day inside the tunnels. The jihadists of Al-Aqsa brigades of the Palestinian resistance are constantly working on developing its objective. The occupation claimed to have targeted these tunnels during the Battle of Saif al-Quds. We confirm that this claim is incorrect.
Such a tunnel could allow armed factions to infiltrate the enemy's side, to kidnap a soldier or civilian, and bring them back to Gaza, to use as bargaining chips to free Palestinian detainees from prisons of the occupation.
To Egypt now. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed on Sunday the issue of Al-Quds with King Abdullah II of Jordan and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, at a time when the international community fears a new conflagration in the holy city. The violence that erupted in mid-April on the esplanade of the mosques in East Al-Quds, the Palestinian sector occupied by Zionists, raised fears of a new escalation. A year after an 11-day war between the Zionists and Hamas, armed resistance movement in the power in the Palestinian enclave of Gaza. Nicaragua said that it has closed the office of the Organization of the American States in the country and is expelling its staff. This comes following the OAS General Assembly voting to condemn the elections in Nicaragua, saying they were not free, fair, or transparent and lack democratic legitimacy. However, the move was decried by the OAS, saying it violated international norms, adding that it could not go into effect until the end of the 2023, given the Nicaragua's status as an active member. Deputy head of the China National Space Administration said that China successfully conducted 55 orbital launches in 2021. And this year, Beijing will further advance its pursuit of space dreams, planning more than 60 launches in the next 5 years. China plans to complete key technology work for major missions such as an asteroid probe and a Mars sampling and a return missions. The development of a heavy lift carrier rocket and a new generation manned launch vehicle will also be carried out in this period. Twitter began negotiations with Elon Musk about a possible purchase of the social media giant by the American businessman. The platform would also like to investigate whether Musk is willing to pay a higher price. The CEO of Tesla had indicated Thursday that he had secured nearly $46.5 billion to finance this transaction, but also said that he planned to go directly through the shareholders of Twitter to buy the company. And before we wrap it up, here is a reminder of today's headlines. The heads of diplomacy and defense of the United States, Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, met on Sunday in Kiev with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Victorious Macron vows to unite France after fending off Le Pen threat. He acknowledges divisions after historic 13 million votes for Le Pen's anti-immigration party. Inhabitants in Beijing rushed to buy food and other supplies as the city's largest district began mass testing of all residents. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our program draws to a close. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.